Russian President Vladimir Putin is threatening to walk away from the Black Sea grain deal unless some sanctions are lifted. The year-long deal has guaranteed safe shipping routes and enabled Ukraine to export grain to the world. With the deal set to expire on Monday, Putin is using the pressure to demand Western countries end blockages on some Russian exports and payments.
We may suspend our participation in the deal. And if they say once again that they will fulfill the promises given to us, let them fulfill those promises. And then we'll rejoin the deal immediately.
And let's get more now with DW Special Correspondent Ibrahim. She's joining us from Kyiv. Russia saying that it sees no grounds to extend the current grain deal. How disruptive could the absence of a deal be for global food supplies, and what could it mean for Ukraine itself?
Well, if Russia pulls out of this deal, this could be disastrous for the world. Exports would simply stop. We would go back to seeing Ukrainian grain stuck in ports. This would lead to shortages. In many places in the world, Ukraine is known as one of the main food baskets of the world. In places like Africa, there would be a short supply, and this would also lead to an increase in the global price of grain, given the shortage that would be created without Ukraine's exports. That's one option. The other option is that Ukraine, defies Russia's actions and continues to export its grain without a security guarantee from Russia. This would put crews and these ships under huge risk and danger of strikes and attacks. This could mean that insurance companies would not be able to, possibly not be able to insure these exports anymore. But Ukraine had previously, when we were, in a similar situation, said that they would try to put together an insurance fund that would insure these ships in the case that Russia pulls out of the grain deal. But in any case, it would have disastrous consequences.
The conflict is well into its second year. Nearly 8 million people have left Ukraine. Many families have been separated. How have you been observing the toll that the war is taking on Ukrainians?
Well, the war is now well into its second year, and it's reached a sort of, I think I would call it a limbo phase for a lot of civilians here in Ukraine. Civilian life is possible in major cities like Kyiv, where I am right now. That's partially thanks to the effective air defense systems that Ukraine has developed over the past year and a half or so. At the same time, there's always a risk that one could get struck. We see this virtually every night, that despite how effective the air defense systems are, every once in a while, a rocket or debris makes its way into a civilian building. We saw what happened in Lviv just last week when a Russian rocket hit an apartment building. And so that puts a lot of families in a very, very difficult, having to make a very, very difficult choice. Do they stay together and take that risk and put their children through having to go to a shelter while they're in school every time there's a siren? Or do they, continue being separated and live with the toll that would have on the family? But with that choice, they would be giving their children perhaps a little bit more safety and stability. It's a very difficult choice that any parent would struggle with. And I spoke to one father here in Kyiv who's been living with that choice. Let's take a listen to what he had to say. This is how Alexander Dumeshinets spends time with his daughter Solomia. His wife Christina often joins in. It's almost like they're together, but they're not. He's at home in Kyiv, and they're thousands of kilometers away.
When I talk to them, it feels like I'm with them. But when I finish the phone call, I look around and I realize that I'm not. But it will pass.
Alexander can't leave the country. Martial law means men of fighting age have to stay. But his family are safe in Scotland. There they have a new house, new school, new friends, and a new language. They're having to build a new life without him.
We see on television and on the internet families getting divorced because the distance is difficult, very difficult. Maybe we're still together because we're united around Solomia. We understand what this is all for.
Alexander does his best to follow Solomia's school progress via voice notes and videos her teachers send.
Okay, Solomia, can you tell me about the different parts of the plant? What's this part?
The petals.
And what do the petals do?
Attract the insects to the flower.
And how do the man...
They even visited him last October. But the light of being together was turned dark by Russian drone attacks on Kyiv where they were.
At that moment, the only thing I prayed for was that they would leave. It was very scary. When you look at the situation, what is happening here and what is best for the child, you have to make sacrifices.
As the war continues, their separation is starting to feel less temporary. At first, Alexander thought they would just have to spend 12 months apart. But now he's accepted that at least for the next school year, the best thing for Solomia is to stay in Scotland. You can find men in Alexander's situation across Ukraine. With no sign that the war will be over soon, experts worry about the long-term effects on families and the country. Ella Libanova has studied socio-demographic problems for decades. She worries that the longer the war lasts, the more rooted children and their mothers will become in their new homes. After the war, returning to a ruined country may seem like a poor option, and many refugees are precisely the people Ukraine will need.
70%. It should be added that 70% of women who left after February 24th have higher educations. You understand very well that if the wife has a higher education, then most likely the husband does too. That is, we will lose a significant part of human and social capital.
Alexander uses bedtime stories to keep a link with his daughter.
It's important, first of all, not to break this connection between us, so we don't create some kind of chasm. We communicate in the morning, during the day, and in the evening. It's like going to bed together.
Tonight, he reads her children's poems by Ukrainian author Volodymyr Vukalenko. He was killed in the war, but his words will remind this Ukrainian child where she comes from.
And there is an invisible cost to this war, isn't there?
Absolutely. There definitely is. I mean, every time I would come into Ukraine, one of the ways is now to take the night train from Poland. I noticed that the vast majority of the passengers on the train would always be women and their children. When we arrive here in Kyiv, I would always witness these very emotional reunions on the train track, and it's something that I asked our team here about. So are people returning en masse back to Ukraine now that lives in cities are possible? We dug into this a little bit, and that's how we stumbled upon really the idea of the story of these stories. We found that most people were just coming here to visit. People like Alexander and his family who have made the choice to stay apart, and we felt that was indeed one of the invisible costs of this war. I mean, this war is perhaps, coverage of this war is perhaps often rightfully dominated with things like the grain deal that we were just talking about, or ammunition deals, or what's going on in the front lines. But then there are stories like this. There are these battles that are going on in Ukrainian society every day, and ones that Ukrainian society will likely have to grapple with for many, many years to come. And we felt that that was just as an important part of that story. And that's how that was the thinking behind speaking to Alexander and his family and giving them the space.
DW Special Correspondent Ibrahim in Kyiv, thank you.